Well, good morning. Hello and welcome to this Bristol Life Business Club. I hope this finds you in good shape. My name is Greg Ingham. There we go. Welcome to this Bristol Life Business Club, and I hope it finds you in good shape. My name is Greg Ingham of Media Clash, the publisher of Bristol Life. This is our latest business club with more tales from the lockdown, candid insights from disparate sectors across Bristol, and how people are navigating these weird times, personally, professionally, and managerially. These are tough times when we can all do with help of hearing others' experiences and thoughts. So in this week 11, I think, of the Great Pause, and there are glimpses of some hibernating businesses coming back to life. Some dentists and health practitioners are back from today. General retail can start from next Monday. And please look forward to Bristol Life's Our Doors Are Open campaign through social media and email. And also our Friday weekly newsletters, which are a good way of promoting your opening up news. And then at some point officially by the end of this week, we'll know the government guidance on hospitality, which is obviously vital for Bristol. That said, there's been a story breaking just today in the FT and elsewhere that bars and pubs can open now from June 22nd, which is just 2 weeks away. We'll be picking up particularly with Owen Morgan about that, but more generally about the principle of opening up. Good luck to all. And of course, many businesses haven't paused. Professional services, for example, have largely continued. And we've had an excellent Bristol Life Business Surgery just last Thursday with Bevan Britton on employment and HR, with several more to follow. If you have a professional service which would help others, financial planning, digital marketing, recruitment, legal services, office fit out, please do talk to us. We can then amplify those messages through all the organisations in Bristol. Our surgeries offer expert advice on key business areas, and it's free, of course, to attend. Like all our business clubs as well, the surgeries are also available on Bristol Life's new YouTube channel. Good luck and good wisdom to all Bristol businesses. Oh, sorry, one more update. If you trade in or just plain interested in Bath, Cardiff and Exeter, look out for our similar business clubs. The link will be in the pinned Media Clash tweet and indeed LinkedIn tweet, post as well. Talking of Cardiff, and this is relevant I know to some, we're running the delayed from March Cardiff Life Awards online on July 9th. Free, obviously, uber glam, most definitely. Our speakers today, we will be hearing from, in this order, Fiona Francombe of Bottle Yard Stduios, and most recently moving over to the Bristol Old Vic Theatre School, Paul Anslow of Triangle Networks, and Owen Morgan of Bar 44. So let me ask Fiona to come forward, and we will talk to you about your personal and indeed professional experiences. Good morning, Fiona.
Morning. Can you hear me all right, Greg?
We can hear you all right, and that's a very good backdrop you've got.
Busy,
yeah,
trying
busy.
to distract.
Yeah, very, very good. Trying to figure that one out. Let's tell us about what was happening for you managerially with the team at Bottle Yard in early mid-March. How and when you decided to effectively stop at that point.
Well, as you know, we are part of Bristol City Council, so we were very much governed by what the council was advising the team. I was actually abroad when the whole sort of C19 build-up was happening, and had to come back early, and then launched into an office that was running for another 4 or 5 days before lockdown started. So we were busy. I mean, the order book was full. You know, we had a really our best year ahead of us in terms of bookings and clients and the projects that were coming in. So we were just taking guidance from the council, from government, and also obviously our tenants were getting more and more concerned about how the site was sort of handling what was breaking, and every day, every hour, the team were getting, you know, questions about when will you close, what will it take to make you close, when should we down tools. And of course we just had to keep saying, well, you know, we're still opening, we're still functioning. It is up to you in terms of your individual production teams to decide when to stop filming. At the time we had Andy's Aquatic Adventures, which is a BBC Bristol show in. We had Tipping Point in. They were, you know, they just started their new series. We had a Stephen Merchant drama called The Offenders that was shooting in Bristol. They were on location using us for offices and set building and that sort of thing. And we had a high-end, really high-end period drama who were just starting. So they were all looking to us almost to make the decision for them. And of course, we weren't in a position to do that. It was up to them to do their own risk assessments, for them to decide to stop filming. And my policy throughout has been that the site won't close. You know, we have 23 permanent tenants as well as all those production clients, and it was really important that we kept open for those permanent tenants to be able to carry on their livelihoods if they possibly could. So we have never closed. The site has always been open. It has been tumbleweed, but the site is open, security are there, the cleaners are in. You know, we're continuing because we needed to maintain that for our tenants.
And how about scheduling or rescheduling those dramas? That must be a logistical nightmare. I really can't even imagine, actually.
Yeah, no, it has been, and it continues to be a huge headache. As I said, we had some amazing projects that were coming in. They still want to come in, but we need to, honourably, we've got to make sure that the shows who were in can come back and complete. So we're working very hard, sort of day by day, talking to them about when they're going to come back, when they're going to resume, how long they're going to need. The prediction is they're all going to need a lot longer because everything will be slower. The whole process is going to be much slower, much more laborious. And none of this is an exact science. So, you can have Tipping Point coming back saying, we think we're going to need 3 months, but we don't know. So what I do then, how I then fill the studios after that, when I haven't really got a definitive cut-off date, is really challenging. I have to say the industry, as ever, have been amazing and very understanding, very tolerant. But, I will need to start putting markers in the ground and start having to give productions a cut-off date. Otherwise, the business is just going to collapse, and, we're not going to have anything coming in after August, September. So, I'm just so mindful that this is this is a business, a facility that's run on public money and needs to make money for the people of Bristol. And, we're one of the few sort of income streams, I suppose, that can give the City Council some return, which they desperately need. So, I just want to make sure that I keep it as busy as possible, and that when I leave, I hand over something that's got some hope and some business savviness about it, going into the rest of the year.
Let's talk about that leaving process. That you're one of the relatively rare breed, I suspect, who are moving from one position to another during lockdown, pandemic times. A little bit of backdrop: how did that come about, and why? And where are you in that process of moving from one to the other?
The theatre school, so that the role is Principal and Chief Executive Officer of Bristol Old Vic Theatre School. I keep saying theatre school because people hear Bristol Old Vic and then stop listening. So the theatre school had been looking to appoint at the end of last year, and they couldn't. I had no idea that the role was vacant. And it was really a chance conversation in February that I heard about it and thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And just started conversations with Chair of Trustees, and went through the process. So, submitted an application form, had 2 rounds of interviews with trustees, and then the second one was a big presentation with everybody, all completely over Zoom. Obviously no face-to-face meetings. I've been to the theatre school probably 2 or 3 times in my career in Bristol. Obviously, know it incredibly well. It has the most amazing reputation. But the most bizarre, interview process, doing it all over Zoom. Not actually physically looking anybody in the eye properly, and not going into the buildings and having a good look and being able to talk to students in advance, which they're the linchpin.
If you think the interview is bizarre, you wait for the induction. That's going to be impossible.
Don't. I mean, it has been the most detached thing, in just peculiar. And you know, my job at the Stduios will end. I'll have a couple of weeks off, and then I'll be into it, and goodness knows what the landscape is going to be at the beginning of August. So it is the most counterintuitive thing I've ever done in my career, but it's really exciting. It's going to be challenging, and the biggest thing for me, the most important thing for me, was that I could stay in Bristol. I didn't want to have to find my next challenge away from Bristol, and you know, I've been incredibly lucky that I've found, as I said, my next challenge in this amazing city.
I'd like to move on briefly to your new area, more broadly, of theatre. And as a whole, theatre and all forms of live events has been absolutely massively hit, of course. Now, post-lockdown, whenever that is, there will be some sort of, you know, allowance, guidelines, social distancing and so on. That's one thing. But what about the cultural points of people perhaps being fearful of being proximate to strangers in the dark in theatre? Do you think that's going to be an inhibitor of how the theatre world per se comes out of this?
Well, I think the theatre world will lead on it. You know, they will absolutely reassure and, you know, make sure that it is still an amazing experience. You know, these are incredibly creative people. They will find a way to make it the experience that it was. It's so important that they've been continuing and trying to find a way to keep the profile and the subject being talked about during lockdown. You know, it's so vital that the arts doesn't get overlooked, and I think they've been very inventive with that, and I think they'll be just as inventive when it comes to reopening and giving audiences the experiences that they must be really missing at the moment.
Very good. Fiona, I mean, clearly, personally, we wish you all the very best in your new world, whenever that starts, whatever it looks like. But for now, we'll move on and we'll bring you back as part of the panel session. So, Fiona, thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Thank you.
Let's bring forward Paul Anslow of Triangle Networks. And Paul, I'm going to ask you a virtually impossible question, I suspect for you, a loquacious man. Tell us briefly what Triangle Networks does.
Yeah, well, thanks, Greg, because yeah, you're quite right. I do tend to talk about these things at some length. So we supply as an internet service provider. We supply internet to small businesses typically, but it might be anywhere up to sort of 100 or so employees. But we do it slightly differently, I suppose. We do it with IT companies and resellers of connectivity and telecommunications. But we also do it. We raise the sort of profile, I suppose, of the new networks that are appearing in order to help drive demand for them. So it's a bit of a kind of partnership network. I suppose you could call that the triangle, I suppose.
The triangle, very good. The metaphor works, I guess. So hence the name. But tell us what you as a business have not been able to do in lockdown. How has it changed the way you operate?
Well, I suppose as a digital business, people would assume that we'd be really, really capable of immediately jumping into a world where we're working from home. But of course, all of our services, with the exception of my own broadband at home, are actually business services for people in their offices. And of course, that's changed. We immediately punted for a September date where we would say, right, well, we'll start to bring events back in later in the year, which sort of meant that we had to work out what we were going to do between March and September. So a lot of that was just trying to be, well, you know, try and plan to be the best version of ourselves that we could be, and has probably had more of a digital marketing focus than anything else. But operationally, it's been really odd not having, because we have one big office space.
And how many people, permanent people on the team?
Well, we'd normally have 24 in the one room. So it's and we're a very sociable lot as well. So it's quite strange to all of a sudden not be able to connect with, particularly the ops teams who are all working from home as the sales goes out.
And aside from like all of us in different ways having to navigate this point about communication and keeping people involved and so on, any top tips for businesses out there about how you keep a tribe together, focused in the right way?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would argue perhaps our IT partners would be best placed to answer that in some detail. But we have seen some really good use of things like Zoom, just for not so much necessarily for business use, which of course is a good use case, but also to keep in touch with staff members who are ultimately disconnected from the rest of the team. So, but right the way through to we started using Teams quite early on, and have all adopted that. The chat functions, things like that, have been pretty good. But that would just be anecdotally from our own experience rather than specialist information. But obviously we would advocate the upgrading of all connectivity to fibre, of course, given that
I'm
now got high demand on it.
And fortunately, as you know, this isn't a pitch session, so that's fine. But tell us this on a sort of more macro basis. Is your business in this? What's your financial year? When's it run to?
End of March.
End of March. Is your year to the end of March headed for up, down, flattish? What? Where are you? Where are you going to come out?
We've often said that even in the face of the recession some time ago, because we're 15 years old as a business, we remember growing the customer base, but with the size of the companies shrinking slightly, it leveled out for quite some time. We're not one of those businesses that makes huge amounts of money in the good times, but equally in the tougher times, it seems to sort of bounce along quite steadily. So we are personally in fairly good nick, but obviously we've aspirations to grow that. We've aspirations to grow it significantly.
There must be many SMEs, some on this call, who would say, all good, but I've got to be really cautious right now with any expenditure. Which isn't that impacting your immediate sales? That caution?
Yes, early on, certainly the caution, similar to when the words voice of IP came out, and everyone started thinking, well, which way do I go with a hardware cloud solution? But I think in the long term it'll be significantly better for the UK generally, and just specifically in these circumstances. I'm being careful not to say this is a good thing, of course, but certainly the situation for the small businesses, as some of them have been very tentatively dipping their toe in the water with digital transformation technology, the use of cloud technology particularly, and haven't taken that leap. And some of those tools can vastly improve somebody's business, whether it be a shop through to a more clerical business. There are some significant improvements, and of course it's been difficult for them to say, let's just make the leap, but of course they've been forced to now. And in the long term, that could really help those small businesses who are now used to having maybe the shops, the very small retailers are looking at e-commerce ideas, very, very sort of simplified e-commerce ideas, or We Are BS3 is a good one. The guys in the Business Improvement District have set up that collaborative e-commerce site, and that kind of thing's really good, really positive. But I suppose we all would wish it under different circumstances, right?
Indeed. Just on that positive point, we will, at some stage in the coming weeks, run a session on the success stories, not so much during lockdown, but potential industry sectors which are set to be, yet stronger, because ultimately it is an ill wind, and there will be companies who will have positives out of this. And one way or another, we all need the overall cake to be, of a size, I guess. I just want to come to one last question to you at this stage. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts of the difference between all office-based and working from home. You mentioned your very sociable culture, and I can attest to that too. But there's a very clear benefit in working from home in multiple ways. Where's your head about how you'll work with your team come the other side?
Well, actually, I'm somebody who likes to go into the office typically, and but actually I get a lot more work done from home, and I think a lot of people would agree that that's the case. But sometimes you have the fear of missing out if you're not in the office and and everything's going on. But I think productivity will be up because people have that flexibility to be able to do both, best of both worlds, but also the resilience if something does happen, a second spike or another situation generally, or maybe damage the office, fires, whatever else. People now know they can quickly manoeuvre, and they have a plan that they can follow next time. Okay, it's a plan that's designed by relative amount of accident, I suppose, in some cases, albeit there's some great IT companies have done some really cool stuff as well, but they'll have that flexibility should something happen again. And so I think that's good. I think offices generally, my hunch is that offices will become slightly smaller, but people will want to do more with them. So, they might make sure they've got the right video conferencing solutions in place. They might look at just the way that the office feels and be a more agile office. And some of the larger companies in London, particularly one of the Vodafone offices, they've been for many years been working as a series of 3 cafes in one of their main offices in the middle of London. So I think we'll all just probably start to follow suit.
Many and profound will be the enduring changes of this period, and we will come on to some of those towards the end of this. For now, Paul, thank you. Let me bring in Owen. All of this this world is acting. Hello, Owen. We're all reacting in real time to the events that are happening, and you just mentioned a little while back about this apparent announcement or leak that the bar and restaurant world could be back from June 22nd. Just prior to commenting on that, just to shape for everyone's benefit, what your business is, where you trade currently or were trading.
Okay, yeah, we're a family business. Myself, my brother and my sister started 18 years ago. We formed, over the years, organically grown into sort of a really modern Spanish restaurant group. We've got 5 restaurants over South Wales and Bristol, so we're covering 2 countries really. It's very much a passion project, and Spain is our obsession. But yeah, up until a few months ago, we were going through a really strong period.
Yeah, you've had and I'll say it for you. You've had tremendous success offering a very distinctive approach, and we know you from your Cardiff business, and we'll come on to the Welsh element as well, but also from Bristol. So tell us your thoughts with your operation right now. You get this news, you may well be back or could be back from the 22nd. Is that good news? Is that...
I just don't think that's humanly possible, to be honest. Even with businesses that have been planning for reopening, you can't very well, in any sector, I would say, just give a 2-week notice period to say, do you know what, it's as easy as coming in and switching on the lights and away you go again. Because, you know, to mobilise and plan for something like this, word unprecedented, it's a big ask, you know, and I can't see that happening whatsoever. I thought July the 4th was unattainable as well. In some sites, we thought we may not be open till October. You know, if you haven't got outside space, that would be the first thing to open. And then depends what he wants to do with the distancing. Is it 2 meters? Is it 1 meter? And you don't want to spend any money at this point because you need all the liquidity you have in the bank. You don't want to spend money on screens and things like that until you know firm facts, and that's what we're not getting. We're getting sort of vague, confusing facts that people jump to assumptions on.
Yeah, the World Health Organization stricture is 1 meter as a minimum. The UK is currently on 2 meters. The logic of retaining 2 is that the pandemic is more prevalent in the UK, therefore we need to be more cautious. But the economic argument is, in doing that, it will stymie development and coming back. Where do you sit on that as a, if I could ask you this, as a citizen about that risk profile? There's more business, there's more risk.
Yes. I mean, even within our own household, we argue about this on a personal level. And some of us are more risk averse than others. For me, I think a 1 meter thing within the business gives you a bit more of a fighting chance. I know many restaurateurs and groups from all over the country have said there's no point in them trying to reopen if it's a 2 meter distance. You're limiting your revenue to a maximum of 50% of what it was before. And then it comes down to a pure negotiation with landlords and property owners of how good your relationship is and what their stance is on it, because we will not be able to pay rent, I would say, in the current format. Again, I think it changes the industry and many industries forever, this does, and it won't be the same again.
And in terms of just the practical number of covers that you might be able to operate, could you give us some indication? I'm assuming you've got some sort of modelling on it, the difference between if it were 2 meters as opposed to if it were 1 meter, what would that mean to you in terms of capacity covers?
I mean, if it's 2 meters, you're probably looking at under 50% capacity at any times. And don't forget, there's only certain times of the week these days in hospitality where you're at full capacity and you need to make that money. There's lots of dead times in the week where it wouldn't come in. So that's how the industry has gone and struggled. But if it becomes 1 meter, that does give you a chance of getting up to sort of at peak times, you're 75% capacity, I would say. And that, with good communication and negotiations with landlords and rents, things like that, that gives you a fighting chance. However, I do believe they're sort of reacting now on an economic angle, and that sort of panic rather than the health aspect, which is really worrying equally.
Well, could I ask you, this is a sort of a leading question. So it is probable that if not June 22nd, it'll be July 4th. Would you ever take the view that it is too risky from a health point of view, never mind the business, and you're just simply not going to open? Or is your determination much more in an economic context as a business owner?
It's a really fine balance. I think we owe it to ourselves and our teams. Throughout this, we're trying to communicate regularly with our teams, our staff. We've got 125 staff, and always our priority is keeping them safe. That was at the best of times. You're dealing with an industry with people and alcohol and things, and staff welfare is the priority. So in this point, when it is potentially life-threatening, that has to come first. And unfortunately, what will be every site and location is very different in terms of size, character buildings, drawbacks in terms of structure. One site is on the first floor and up a very narrow staircase. How on earth do you open that safely with traffic up and down the stairs passing each other? It's not possible. So
a similar question to the one to Fiona about the social inhibitor, the cultural thing. The government will say what you can do. You will take your decision about what you can do. What about customers who may feel, you know what, I actually don't want to risk that. I don't have the reassurance yet. How can the sector overcome that inhibition?
I think this is going to be the biggest problem, and the sector has always thought actually times are going to be when we do reopen as a sector. You're going to be in the middle of a recession, going into a recession, massively high unemployment rates. People are around you see or speak to on Zooms and lockdown and think, oh, we can't wait to get back and we really want to come and spend our money with you. But actually, in reality, I think people are going to be much more cautious. They will pick and choose where they want to go, which operators really think about it well and are organised and structured, and they will have to be very firm with people. And that's going to be the tipping point. I think there's going to be less money in people's pockets. Wage levels aren't going to be going back to what they were before. There's going to be less disposable income. So I don't think the industry will ever get back to what it was before. And it was under a lot of pressure before. To remind everyone, with Brexit, exchange rates, cost of produce, labour rates, overheads generally skyrocketing, and margins really been pinched over the years. So this is a massive watershed moment, and we're looking to change our structure completely forever, I think.
Tell us about how you're approaching this with your team. Apart exactly when and how you'd open, but how they might be different, particularly the front of house. Food is inherently sociable. Sociability will be changed by this, as pretty much everything else is. Are you imagining that they would be sort of schooled to be different to what they were previously, or what?
The staff and the order of service.
The front of house particularly, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the menus will probably be halved almost for a start, because you can't have the same numbers in the kitchen if they'll have to work further apart from each other, and the same front of house. So it'll be less staff, unfortunately. Smaller menus, smaller offerings, smaller stock holding, which is cash tied up. And, you've seen funny videos on social media throughout this time elsewhere in the world where they're sort of back open and a waitress is coming out with drinks and food and throwing it to a table 2 meters away, like a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing. But it's massive. And hospitality for us is about warmth and a human, that buzz of being in a restaurant with clinking glasses, chatter, having fun, laughter. And we want our staff to be like that as they were before with guests. But if they can't get close to them, it's a very human, physical thing. we are looking at things like apps and technology for ordering and payments, so it's completely contactless, that whole process. But will it have to come up to a service area to get your drinks, all this sort of thing as well? All stuff like will we have to go to disposables in terms of crockery, glassware, things like that? It's all needs to be chatted about, and we're constantly chatting to staff who's coming up with ideas as of now. And then the takeaway thing, an online thing, will become a core part of hospitality business from now on, I think, when we're back open.
And a slightly different perspective, which I'll be interested in your comment on, is that we as human beings are all creatures of what we've most recently experienced, and we expect the most recent to be extrapolated. That in a few weeks, certainly in a few months' time, we're going to be in a different place and looking forward from that point. So it may be that one way or another, we are culturally attuned to a different form of operating, which won't be quite such an inhibition to your sector. Do you buy that?
I think people will be used to doing things a different way. I mean, it's my hope is, whether it's unfounded or not, or unreasonable, is people have got used to also shopping locally again, and using local butchers, fishmongers, fruit and veg merchants, and that's been a great thing. It's going backwards in time, really, to seasonality and what's available. But then people realising it's good things cost money, and will people realise that they may have to pay more for things like that in the future? Equally, people will adapt to new ways of service and doing things because it's necessary. So I hope that people will adapt, as you say, to current and future things, and that will be the case.
And one of the key themes which we see at Bristol Life with this pandemic is that the lockdown is making everything local, that we are all more aware of and perhaps probably have a higher regard for our immediate locales, the sense of the network of independent businesses, exactly as you discussed. And then an even further element is, because there is likely to be more people working from home, or at least for some hours days each week, the hyper-local will also develop, where people want stuff, whatever that is, within 5-10 minutes they can pop out during lunchtime, which is not the city centres in quite the same way. So economy will change. How it develops for you, we can only wish you all the very best, of course, for you individually, but for the sector as a whole. I've got one last question for you, if I may, Owen, which is about Cardiff. That is your hometown, where the business started and trades very successfully, award-winning business there. How is it working for you as a business owner with two jurisdictions, one government saying this, one other government leaking that?
Yeah, it's quite bizarre. And then when we go to check on the units, for fire alarms and things like that, one of our main units is right opposite the Principality Stadium, the rugby stadium, which of course now is a hospital. And so you're seeing it starkly in your face every week. And then you look at the government guidelines, and it's anything on the news mentioned, of course, is all Westminster based. And for 4 out of our 5 businesses, it doesn't apply. We've had separate economic resilience funds available in Wales, which I'm not sure many people realise, but that fund and grant money has come from the EU. It's not come from the UK. It's European money that we've tapped into, which was not available in Bristol. So that's another thing. And the whole timeline of the devolved nations sort of doing their own thing time-wise, maybe being more cautious than Westminster, is confusing. So we have got a completely sort of separate conversation, really, when we're thinking West Country and Bristol, which is also where our heart is, and we spent years growing up living there as well. And that's what we desperately want to open there when we can. But then we speak about Wales and Mark Drakeford, and they admitted this last week on Zoom. It hasn't been discussed, hospitality, yet. You give it another 3-4 weeks before it's a discussion. So it's, interesting times. It's not boring. But there we go.
That is a euphemism indeed, but it just adds to the level of complexity at a complex time for you as a business owner and your team. As I say, we do wish you well. Let's have our other 2 panellists back forward, please. if we can have Paul and Fiona. We've got a few more questions. Please also, anyone on this call, if you wish to, ask a question via the Q&A button at the bottom. We'll explore a few more things. I'd like to ask you this, all of you, if you wish. What has surprised you positively about how your teams, or indeed others, perhaps suppliers and so on, have responded during this lockdown time? Who'd like to go first?
I'll go first. My team have been amazing. I mean, they're all from a sort of television background, so we're very used to being, you know, in an office together and rolling our sleeves up and making things work. And they've all had to work from home and, you know, just sort of try and get used to this new way of working. And it's actually been really affirming for us all. I think we've had daily team meetings, and I think it's just been a very good way of us all to rebond a bit away from all the doing and just, you know, have time reflecting. And obviously, you know, all the usual, you know, they've had time to do training and that sort of thing, but I think also just had time to realise how much work-life balance was askew before the lockdown.
Paul, what about any surprises perhaps with, I don't know, suppliers and partners and so on? Anything in that direction?
Yeah, I think people have become a lot more open to sort of conversations that you might not have before, and it's about people. You know, we've got a bit of an insight into people's own personal lives, haven't we? We would normally only see the face of a supplier and the account manager and whatnot. Whereas now we're having those calls, and even social calls with suppliers, and you know, everyone's kids or dogs or, you know, are running around and, you know, barking, the dog, I mean, but we have that sort of much more personal interaction now. And I think that's really helping because, you know, people do feel better and do work better together if they have more of an association like that. So that's been a big positive.
And Owen, for you, with perhaps with your suppliers, even dare I say your landlords and so on, has there been you know, positive support or whatever?
It's been quite mixed. With things like landlords, you're looking, some of them are family property owners, others are big national estate owners. So it's been difficult. And ones you can speak to directly quite easily, those are the ones where you've had the best conversations and you know more personally. Suppliers, we've always had a great camaraderie with, you know, going on trips to different parts of Spain with them, sourcing produce and things like this. Obviously, we're very social animals, so we like a drink and a nibble. And we've done that over Zoom and things like that, which has become the new norm. And the same with our teams. We've done that equally. We've helped them to carry on upskilling through this process when they've had the time to get qualifications online and things like that in different areas of the sector, which has been great.
And here's a litmus test for you then. When are you planning your first trip to the Basque country?
I was still trying to get some money back from airlines for trips I've already missed, which is proving difficult. But I don't know. The World Cheese Awards, which I've been invited to, which is in Oviedo in Asturias in late September, I think. But who knows? Yeah, I'm not holding out much hope just yet.
The World Cheese Awards, that somewhat appeals, but let's come on to the sort of bigger picture. Clearly, we are all changed by this experience, and in many ways, we won't know how much change until retrospect. That old phrase, we live our lives forward, but we understand it backwards. But of what the changes there have been, what do you think might endure? How might we, not being crass, but actually sort of benefit from this experience? We will do things better. Who'd like to make an observation?
Going from the conversation earlier about digital stuff, I think people are becoming more capable. And Owen was talking about apps that might then be used, you know, from the table to, you know, order and you know, obviously the logistics of that are of course challenging, but those kind of things really, you know, really will help. The one that I think's been interesting for us is that you know, anecdotally years ago I had my wife's grandmother who we would see once or twice a year, and people are now seeing, you know, elderly relatives very, very frequently. Of course, they're able to see them on video calls, and we've seen it in a spike of care home internet connectivity across the sector. But actually that again is about people. It's about families who are able to stay in touch with people they were otherwise unable to see very frequently, especially if they're further away. So that kind of stuff will stay. And I think as people, get better at communicating with the tools they have, then it's keeping people connected at the same time.
Fiona, what might endure?
I'm hoping that that crew who have, historically gone from job to job to job, often working away from home, will realise quite the value of home life and keeping connected with that, and how good it is for their own well-being. I suppose the initial concern with that is that none of them really have had any support at all. The sector has been really badly supported, so they're all going to feel they've got to rush back to work. But I really hope that they carry this amazing time that they've had at home, predominantly amazing, I'm hearing, obviously not for everybody, but for most of them, and really want to continue that into their working lives, so they do have breaks in between contracts, and they do just keep reconnecting with the family.
And Owen, thank you. Separate perhaps to your immediate business, even sector, do you think that come the return, square brackets, whenever that is, that people will continue this perhaps a slightly more contemplative, softer, more thoughtful approach, or B, just start running as fast as possible because they've got to make up the gaps previously, and they're straight back onto the same treadmill?
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, and I think this downtime, like personally from a family point of view and friends, I've never spent so much time with my family and two little girls, and that never would have happened, because it's always a million miles an hour. And the same, I've chatted to more people on my street than I ever have before, and I know more about them now, and it's lovely. And we all talk to each other, and we help each other out. If anyone is going to the shops, they'll get stuff for each other. And the human sort of kindness angle, it might sound a bit fluffy, but that's been really lovely, and we've really enjoyed it, and the community side. And like Paul said, with the tech side of things, I think that will stay, and it's really important. There's a slight concern of me, the whole, our industry is renowned, it's quite sort of volatile in the way people think about food and drink, the whole TripAdvisor phenomenon, that kind of thing, where people are very quick to judge and criticise. And you would hope through all this that people would take a step back and think, this is people's lives, their businesses, and it's supporting many lives and businesses, that before they criticise or do this, that and the other, they speak to you personally about things, rather than using platforms for the wrong reason. But I would hope people wouldn't be such million miles an hour, and would have a better work-life balance after this as well. So, yeah.
When it comes to using platforms for the wrong reason, at least we haven't got the example of the leader of the free world apparently using. Oh, I won't go there. But I think there is a deeper issue here, that with TripAdvisor and with Twitter, that it does invite an angels or devils. You either are passionately for or passionately against, because in the case of restaurants, the idea of posting, it was perfectly nice, it was absolutely lovely, as expected, blah, blah, blah. That's just much less likely to be said than it was amazing or it was terrible. We've become very binary in our thinking, from which we're all suffering. You go on Twitter, it's a something storm of opinions. Is that going to change, or is that actually going to be accelerated by this, because we're all using social media much more than previously?
You're seeing quite a volatile time now. Look at yesterday in Bristol, and I was just reading Twitter, and I couldn't quite comprehend or get my head around a lot of it. And it does incent, there's no reasoned debate or argument. It's very agitated and angry, one side or the other. And you just wish people would take, I know it's very, very sensitive subject, so it's hard to sort of say that, but you wish people would take a breath and say, look, let's just talk about this properly, rather than that whole, and it can stress you out just reading it,
And depressed at times. Can I come on to the position of Bristol as a whole? For all its incredible momentum, its diversity in all respects, but I'm talking in this context of business types and so on. it too is profoundly being affected. It just does not have the finances, the ability to do what it wishes to do, to attract the talent and so on. What's your take on Bristol as a city and its prognosis, perhaps compared with other places? And I'm not just thinking Cardiff, Owen, I'm thinking more generally. How well is Bristol placed to rebound?
I think Bristol's really well placed. You know, I think we have the most amazing ethos. We have the most, you know, amazing, you know, sort of can-do and positive attitude. There are huge challenges ahead. I mean, the City Council are losing, I think it's 1.5 million a week at the moment. You know, they are going to continue to be in really dire financial straits, and they're going to need business to really, you know, help with that recovery. I'm part of the One City Economy Board, and there is so much talk around recovery. You have a mayor who is really, really wanting to look forward and not, you know, not sort of bemoan what situation is right now. He really wanting to look forward and do the very best for the city. But it's going to be challenging. Of course it is. It's going to be challenging for every city. But I do think that the people of Bristol have such a passion and a pride in their city that, you know, they will all do the very, very, very best that they can.
Paul, do you buy that? The broader point that the passion and belief in Bristol of itself is one of the ways that Bristol will recover from this?
I think the thing we've seen over, particularly the last few years, is the rise of the importance of the SME business as part of that that community, particularly in the middle of the city, and some real resilience and desire to innovate and basically get themselves out of trouble. Lots of the businesses we work with have said, you know, they're struggling right now, but already thinking of plans, you know, and not to say this would be any different anywhere else in the UK. I wouldn't necessarily have an opinion in that way, but certainly Bristol seems to want to lead and innovate and dare to be different and dare to take the risk. And in some other cities that perhaps that we've worked in what we do, they're a lot more resistant to that kind of change. But yeah, I think that's what will make the difference.
And certainly, without commenting absolutely directly on it, the events of yesterday illustrate the individuality, the defining characteristics of Bristol, which perhaps other cities don't have, but maybe for historic reasons, and there's a bigger debate around that. I want to come to Owen about this point. Do you buy the point that Bristol is at least as well placed as other cities? It's going to be tough for all, but at least Bristol has various key positives to look forward to.
I think Bristol sticks out more than almost any other city in the UK in its sense, because since the few years we've been operating the business there, we thought we knew Bristol like the back of our hand. You never do, of course, but the thing that sticks out for us is the staunch sort of community spirit, and they're fiercely independent. People in Bristol live in Bristol. Obviously, I can only speak from our own sector, but I think what we found is people say something in Bristol and they do it, whereas in other cities in the UK, they'll pay lip service and say things, but don't follow through. And I think people in Bristol do support independent businesses rather than bigger chains and groups and things like that, and it shows through lots of different ways. So I think, yeah, they do have a big head start.
Do you think there's to all of you really? Do you think there's a greater opportunity and indeed need for collaboration than there has been to date? Is that part of how businesses interact really going to change, or is that pie in the sky?
It's tricky to, I suppose, think of collaboration as, you know, people talk about collaboration and you slightly imagine a round table with a bunch of people, you're having a conversation, coming up with ideas. But there are some practical applications, of course, when it comes to delivery of services and the various groups that are working in their own silos. You know, breaking those down is really important. I do think that has started to happen more because people are becoming more personally attached to other people in different sectors, particularly whether it be the work across from social care through to business connectivity or technology or whatever. That needs to happen, but that's probably something I see as one of the guiding personality traits of Bristol as a whole, which is that ability to break those things down and collaborate for practical reasons, not just to sit around and knock ideas about, I suppose.
And Fiona, that's very much a characteristic of the arts world generally, that collaborative, the sense of, I don't know, an ecosystem where you're all contributing in some way to each other and for each other.
Yeah.
Has that changed, or is that fun? That's just inherent? There's nothing new there. Won't change going forwards?
I think it's not there, but I think it's not changed, but it's always been there. And I think, there are huge positives coming out of it. One of my more recent responsibilities is to line manage the festivals and events team within the council. The events sector has been absolutely, all those festivals, events, everything has been cancelled. And there has been a forum where they've all got together with, Councillor Asher Craig and, started talking about how they can get this events sector up and running again. And my goodness, the collaboration between them and the will to collaborate, because they're going to have to reschedule events across the city, hopefully from the autumn going into next year, can they work much more collaboratively on very practical things like, sharing facilities, and if someone's putting a marquee up or a stage, can another festival event organizer share that the following week, or, those sort of things. But also just wanting to really work together to get guidelines in place about how to hold those events well, that they've never collaborated as much as that before, and that's really heartening to see. And I hope that continues, that they yes, though it is a sort of competitive world for them, but it's also a real opportunity to make a difference, and make a difference for Bristol, do it better, do it stronger, and hopefully be more streamlined in that process.
Thank you, Owen. The foodie world, almost literally or metaphorically, there is a food chain. You think you are likely to be more collaborative going forwards, or you are so hit financially, it's got to be every person for themselves and just drive value wherever you can get it?
We've always collaborated massively with not just people in our own sector. So we're up in Clifton, which is sort of outside the city centre, but we've actively gone to engage with all types of business in the village there. So collaborating with a charity shop next door, letting them have space to do a charity fashion evening, things like this. Estate agents giving them space for a weekly meeting. People come and do podcasts from the downstairs room, things like this. And we're part of Clifton Bid, so we'll give the space to host meetings where we're benefiting from owners in all sorts of different types of business, just collaborating ideas. Everyone can help each other. So it's not just within your own sector, I think. And yes, you hope that gives a 360 thing, as they're more likely to come and have a meal with you, have a drink, or have their next meeting with you, because it's a reciprocal thing. And I think old-fashioned reciprocal business is what we'd want to do going forward. We'll continue to do it.
And very much sparked by a combination of ingenuity and necessity, or indeed personal desire. Could I, we're coming to the close, I want to ask you each a personal question and then come on to the good that people have been doing. The personal question is this: how have you coped? How difficult have you found some of this time personally? Please share, because that old cliche, we're all in it together. We've all had incredibly sort of dark nights of the soul and difficult times. Perhaps just tell us about where you have found it difficult and how you've overcome that.
I don't mind starting that one again. To be honest, at the very start, the role of being a business leader of any kind is, of course, to look after those employed by you, and of course the success of the business. And that in the first instance, the thing I noticed was that how difficult it was to plan when the change was daily, not monthly or yearly. The change was happening whilst we were watching it, and that was quite challenging. And the other side of it being a very sort of social person in open plan office, and I like to buzz up and down to other offices in the UK that we have, and immediately being put on kind of you can't go anywhere was difficult, because then anything you're thinking about and all your plans, you don't have that headspace to disappear off. You've got, in my case, 3 children running around and sort of keeping things afloat. And I think that's challenging for anyone. And you just the nature of the changing nature of the plans was probably the hardest thing, certainly, that I found. And the tonic for it, I suppose, was the team just cracking on and saying, look, we're just going to keep plugging away. We're just going to keep plugging away, and and knowing that was all going on, whilst being able to then adjust what might be the new normal, for one of those awful phrases, but what that new normal is going to be like is, and how that's going to impact the other staff members personally as well. We've got headspace now to start to plan those things.
Thank you. Owen, personally for you, what have been the key challenges? There are different times for us all.
It's been really hard. It feels like so long now when you think back to the announcement that things are going to happen. For us, it was by the blue. It was, there was meant to be a big international rugby game happening against Scotland, and we had fridges packed and cellars packed of produce that we'd spent money on and couldn't use. And then there was a lockdown day where you're seeing all the staff, and it's very emotional. A lot of them are young, are scared, didn't know what to do. All we could think of doing was cooking up all this stuff for them to package it up for freezer meals for them to take home and look after themselves for a month or so, and then give the rest away. So there's that phase of it. Then it was getting used to being at home yourself and with the family again. And, then you have high days. You have a good old drink over Zoom and act silly and stuff like that. Then you have days you wake up and you really feel it at the pit of your stomach, and you're worried about your personal situation and finance, and then you're worried about the business. So it's been a personal versus compartmentalizing, I guess, your personal situation, the business, and then on that side having to actually show strong leadership and make horrible, tough decisions for the good of us and the business as well. So it's been, and not knowing what day it is just strange. And do I stay in a tracksuit all day, or do I get dressed, or weird stuff like that?
Everything is variable, and there are no set courses in which we're running on. Fiona, from a personal point of view, how have you been navigating this?
Well, there have been. I'm lucky in that my days are structured. I've never had so many emails and the stress of all that. My husband works in the television industry. He's a production designer, so he has had no work. So that's been quite a it's been interesting. I mean, that I can come down and I can have a conversation about my day, and yet his day has been exactly the same as the day before, and probably will be the next day. So I think that the sort of that meeting of minds at the end of the day to talk about how the day has been is very different, and that's been quite interesting. Our daughter Jess is a frontline nurse. She's a children's nurse in London at University College Hospital. So that has been incredibly difficult. We haven't been able to see her, obviously, and to hear the stories of things that she's had to cope with. She fell victim to COVID-19. That's not a surprise because there wasn't enough PPE. So, as a parent, that's been incredibly hard. But she is amazing at what she does, and she has actually helped us to get through it. She's been braver probably than we have at times. So it has been really hard. My mother is in a nursing home. I haven't been able to see her. There's lots and lots of things. But I'm really, crikey, I'm pretty lucky and fortunate in the position that I'm in. And I do count my blessings every day. I do know how lucky I am.
That's very, very touching what you said, and very valuable context, which I'm sure we are all aware of, but it helps to be reminded once more of that context. to our last question, it's this. It's been really touching in these last few weeks, these awful weeks of lockdown, to see the good that people and businesses in Bristol are doing. They're finding clever, creative ways to support and help where they can. And we've been sharing this on social media, wonderful, not dreadful, wonderful social media, using the hashtag Bristol Together. And we encourage everyone to do that. So if I could ask our panelists, perhaps start with Paul, as an example of something you've been struck by, a particularly decent thing that others have done, not necessarily your business or sector.
Yeah, that's a hard one, Greg. It's I think there's loads of great stories of people doing some brilliant fundraising. I think that's really cool. But for me, what strikes me is, and what impresses me, is how young people react to these kind of situations. And I, as I said, I have children. One's just about to be up to comprehensive school in September. But their sort of group of friends, and how sort of caring they are of each other, how intuitive they are as to what they can do to support those who perhaps are by themselves at home or whatever, and how they've sort of stayed in touch and done their own fundraising and off their own back as well, not because they've been told to do it, but actually they've so it's nice and comforting to know that the future of our workforces and our families is a positive.
Good, thank you. Owen, a quick one if I may.
For me, probably coming back to what I mentioned earlier, and my immediate vicinity of on our street, getting to know so many people, and everyone started to share, whether it's the kids and family or adults or both, just being incredibly generous, speaking every day, it's just out the front, offering things to each other, setting up, again, charity fun events, doing virtual sort of bike rides, running challenges to raise money for different causes, all this sort of stuff. So it's been massive, and that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for this and we weren't all at home. So it's been, from a human element, that's been the best part for me.
Good. Take the positives. So Fiona, lastly.
Two very, very quick ones. One is an amazing website called 19 Stories, which is set up by a lady called Kerry Mead over in Eastfield, with 19 stories of tales during lockdown, everyday life. That's tough. Some of it's a tough read. And the other one for me was, I don't know if anybody's seen them, little pink flags around the parks, installed by the at the Art Kindness, with just little messages. So when you're walking your dog or having your sort of fresh air fix, there's just little messages on those little pink flags, and they're dotted around the parks in Bristol. I think that's just wonderful.
Very good. People have been so thoughtful in these difficult times. On your behalf, I'd like to thank our panel. So that is Fiona, Paul and Owen. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you also to the Bristol Life Business Club's sponsor in real life, so that's Bevan Britton. And thank you also for everyone's time today. Please look out for future Bristol Life business surgeries as well, including sessions on financial planning, commercial property, digital strategies, office design, recruitment and the like. Good luck to you all. Good luck to all of us navigating through these unimagined times. And let's hold to the belief, which has come out a little bit here, that enduring good can come from these times. This is a tough time, but this too shall pass. This has been a Media Clash production, and this has been a very singular Bristol Life Business Club. Thank you. Bristol together.
Thank you.
Thanks, Greg.